Hey everybody, I was chilling out here in the office, listening to a little rush in the background. I don't know if you can hear it or not. It is 5:40. Look how late I stay. I'm here at 5:40. Nah, it's 'cause I love you guys. And we were talking the other day about Madison v. Marbury, and it's so important I wanted to spend just a few minutes kind of tying it all up. I'm going to put another YouTube video that another student made, not even my student. It's pretty good. It's got some pictures and a few more dates. Could be useful for you. It's not a huge thing. I'm not going to ask you an essay about Madison v. Marbury, though it may, be a paragraph type thing. It's critical because it's the first major case. I told you that in class. And because of the first major case, what ultimately it does is it opens the door for bringing the Supreme Court into equal status. As I told you, Constitution really doesn't say much about the Supreme Court. Gives it a few tidbits of info, but up to that point, they haven't really done much. And you know that because Jay's treaty, John Jay was the Supreme Court Chief Justice, so he had nothing to do, and so Washington sent him off to England to get a new treaty. So that was what he did. Well, Adams loses the election in 1800. Of course, they don't take office until like February. So in those last 3 or 4 months, the Federalist Party, which was in control of the Congress, wanted to try to shore up its position. And so it made a whole bunch of new judicial courts and places, and they put people who were Federalists into power. And the way that works is basically there's an official letter. That letter is taken, folded up, and on this letter they'll basically say, hey, you have been chosen to be a Supreme Court Justice. And that's still true today, really. And in the process, the person already knows, it's already kind of behind the scenes, everybody's got it all figured out. He's waiting on the letter. The President signs off on the letter and gives it to the Secretary of State. Secretary of State's job is to deliver the letter. Everybody knows it's happening, it's going to go to the Senate, get approved, all that kind of fun stuff. So the Federalists had already spoken to all their players, people that they wanted in office to be judges after, and basically while Jefferson is in power, to be counterbalance. Remember, Adams himself is not a Federalist, not of the first order, not of a political party. So, I'm not saying Adams did anything opposing it one way or the other, but this all happened late in the game. And ultimately, they end up on on Adams' desk very late in his term, the night before he's supposed to leave the White House. So he signs off on all these, and they go to the Secretary of State's office, and they sit on his desk. Well, Jefferson comes in essence, the next day, and his Secretary of State is his buddy, James Madison. And so Madison goes in, there's all these letters for these new judges that are going to be Federalists, that are going to oppose everything the Republicans want to do. So he goes to Jefferson and says, what should I do? Jefferson basically tells him to break the laws. Don't send the letters. Madison does not have the power to not send the letters. He doesn't have to like the people, but still process, sign, seal, delivered, all that kind of stuff. But he doesn't send the letters. Well, the one guy, Marbury, knows he's supposed to get the letter, and he complains. And so he sues in court to the Supreme Court. Now, then, as I said in class, this then becomes a challenge for the new Chief Justice, John Marshall, who was a high Federalist. He liked Hamilton. He worshipped Washington. He and Adams weren't all that close necessarily, but he thought Washington was great. So that tells you how he feels about Jefferson, right? So then, what he does then is he realizes he's got a quandary, and it's the quandary of our society today. The issue of law in our society, Locke's social contract, operates only in as far as we are willing to accept it as justice, right? Meaning you and I stop at stop signs at 2 or 3 in the morning. There's nobody around. You may roll a little bit, but most of us stop, even though there's no cop anywhere. And why do we do that? Because we believe in the social contract. I stop because I want you to stop. What if there's a kid somewhere? Well, it's just bad habits, all that kind of stuff. When we see somebody run a stoplight or stop sign, most of us get angry. We're like, oh, where's a cop when we need him, right? Well, that's all based on this idea of the social contract holding us together. Okay? And it's been one of our key issues. But it only operates because we believe it. The Supreme Court does not have its own set of cops. It doesn't have its own army. It can't go out and enforce things. And if the Supreme Court tells you something, now you and I obey, because why? Well, we know we might get arrested. But what if it's the President? Can they make the President do something? Well, that's the challenge. And that's where Marshall finds himself. At the end of the day, they rule a couple weeks later, and Marshall basically realizes, look, I cannot make Jefferson, because it's not Madison, it's Jefferson who needs to go to jail, or who basically needs to admit he's wrong. I can't make him admit he's wrong. And it's early in the term, and Marshall realizes early in the term of our history, Marshall realizes that if he reaches out and says, hey, look, Jefferson, you have to do this, and Jefferson says, make me, what's he going to do? And so ultimately at that point, Marshall realizes he's stuck. Marbury deserves the job, but Marshall can't give it to him. Madison's wrong, but Madison's wrong because of Jefferson. So now what? Well, what he does is he reaches back in English history and pulls out this idea of judicial review. And it's fully Marshall's creation. Well, he's borrowing it from England, but I mean to bring it into our country. And he basically says, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this to say that the law that was supposed to give Marbury his position, that's unconstitutional. And so he's going to rule on a law that was passed by Congress, signed by the President. Jefferson allows it to happen because Jefferson knows on the short version he's won. And later he realizes, you know, I've probably lost, because it's going to give this huge ball of power to the Supreme Court that, again, our Constitution never really says. Today when you hear people argue about, oh, the court shouldn't be in there doing things and it's being too active, it's legislating from the bench, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, and I've heard both sides complain. Ultimately what they're arguing about is judicial review, that the court should not have this ability. But the court does, because of Marshall. Nobody's ever stopped them. Nobody said, no, you can't do that. And Madison v. Marbury then becomes kind of this key major case. Alright? You want to watch the other videos? Got some good little info, some things, pictures, could be useful for you. Alright? Thanks.